Good morning. It's Monday, the 16th of December. You're tuned in to our 10 a.m. newscast here at ARIRANG's news center in Seoul. Let's take a look at what's making the headlines. President Park Geun-hye will assess the situation in North Korea with her top security officials following the execution of regime leader Kim Jong-un's uncle. We also bring you a special report on Kim's two-year reign. With the management of state-run KORAIL and the union showing no signs of backing down, the week-long rail strike is taking a toll on the nation's passenger and freight train services. The government and the prosecution say the strike is illegal and they have vowed to take appropriate action. Plus, the world bids a final farewell to Nelson Mandela as he is laid to rest in his ancestral home of Kunu. President Park Geun-hye will preside over a meeting of foreign affairs and security ministers this Monday to discuss the situation in North Korea following its abrupt execution last week of leader Kim Jong-un's uncle. South Korea is keeping a close watch on the North based on an understanding that Jang Song-taek's execution suggests the Kim Jong-un regime is not as stable as thought, and that Pyongyang could possibly launch a provocation to turn people's attention away from its internal issues. Those attending this afternoon's meeting will be President Park's top security advisor Kim Jong-soo, the country's defense, foreign affairs and unification ministers, as well as the spy agency chief. A senior North Korean official says the execution of leader Kim Jong-un's uncle will not negatively affect the country's economic policies, and North Korea will push ahead with attracting foreign investment by developing new economic zones. Kim Jong Ils reports.
Yoon Young-seok, a senior member of the State Economic Development Committee, told the Associated Press on Sunday that Pyongyang's trade goals remain the same despite Jang Song-taek's execution.
Even the Jang Song-taek's group caused great harm to our economy. There will be no change at all in the economic policy of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. It's just the same as before.
Last month, North Korea announced plans to create special economic zones in each province to provide incentives for foreign tourism and investment. Yoon said Chang's removal would instead speed up progress on the economic front because he was a threat to national unity. He said Chang's execution should not scare away Chinese investment, which is crucial to the success of the zones.
Our State Economic Development Committee welcomes investment and business from any country to take part in the work of developing our new economic zones.
However, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said Sunday that Chang's execution is an ominous sign of the instability and danger that exists in North Korea. He said Kim Jong-un's decision to execute his uncle underscores the importance of a well-coordinated international effort to reduce nuclear threats from the country. Meanwhile, Kim Jong-hye, Jang Song-taek's wife and the aunt of Kim Jong-un, appears to have survived the purge and execution of her husband, as her name was included on a leadership list in the North state-run media over the weekend. Kim Jonguns, ARIRANG News.
North Korea will mark the second anniversary of former leader Kim Jong Il's death on Tuesday, just a matter of days after current leader Kim Jong-un had his once powerful uncle Jang Song-taek executed. The memorial service for Kim Jong-il and planned visits to North Korea by foreign dignitaries this week should give us a glimpse into the regime's new power hierarchy. Our Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang Sang-hee reports.
With the death of late North Korean ruler Kim Jong-il on December 17, 2011, his 27-year-old successor Kim Jong-un found his hands full. A nuclear arsenal, over 1 million troops, more than $6 trillion worth of natural resources, together with a heavily oppressed and impoverished population of 24 million, were all under the young Kim's reign. Making friends with an American NBA star and courting his fashionable wife in public, the young leader certainly distinguished himself from his father.
His father was more distant. He seems to be more like a natural politician who actually gets on well with people and mixes with them. He's photogenic like his grandfather was. And so that's what he's been deploying in his leadership style.
But the shuddering side of Kim Jong-un was revealed just days before his 2-year anniversary in power, with the young leader removing his own family member from North Korea's ruling elite. Experts say the execution of his uncle Chang Sung-taek, who was known as the second most powerful man in North Korea, signals that the young leader has entered a new phase in his leadership.
A second-in-command cannot exist in North Korea. Only one leader exists. In that sense, Kim Jong-un seems to have removed Chang Sung-taek, the second man in power, to tighten his grip on power.
As shocking as the news of Chang's removal was to the outside world, experts say it was a calculated move and a much expected one. One by one, Kim had been dismissing senior officials from his father's generation and replacing them with his own inner circle. But Chang's execution may also destabilize the North Korean regime.
It shows how corrupted the North Korean leadership is and that there are many internal conflicts due to the forces who oppose change. In the long term, this may provoke the North Korean citizens.
In the foreseeable future, however, the young leader will continue portraying himself as a relaxed and open ruler, welcoming retired American basketball player Dennis Rodman for the 3rd time this year, and allowing an international delegation to tour the Kaesong Industrial Complex this week. Hwang Sang-hee, ARIRANG News.
The South Korean Air Force carried out a surveillance flight that included the submerged rock Eodo off the southern coast on Sunday, as the country's newly expanded air defense zone came into effect. Officials said that an early warning plane was mobilized on a patrol and surveillance mission over some parts of the extended Korea Air Defense Identification Zone. An official said foreign aircraft passing through the zone will be required to identify themselves 15 to 30 minutes in advance, maintain communications and file flight plans. Seoul did not inform Chinese authorities of its patrol in advance. A week ago, Seoul announced the new zone to counter Beijing's unilateral decision last month to expand its own to cover the Korea-controlled Eodo and the southern islands of Marado and Hongdo. The National Assembly's Special Committee to Reform the State Spy Agency will begin discussions on how to amend related laws this week. Starting Monday, the committee will gather experts' views for 2 days and then move on to deliberating how the National Intelligence Service law and a law on public officials should be revised. Reports suggest the ruling party wants to limit the scope of reform, saying the agency did its job well, collecting information on the purging of Chang Sung-taek in North Korea. The opposition party wants to limit the agency's domestic affairs unit, saying that doing so would allow it to better focus on North Korea and stay away from local politics. The National Intelligence Service has been accused of meddling in last year's presidential election by using social networking services to sway public opinion in favor of then ruling party candidate Park Geun-hye. Turning now to the railway strike that looks set to go to the long haul. Striking rail workers say they will hold a massive protest rally in Seoul this week unless the government goes back on its plans to set up a new rail operator that they claim is the first step towards privatization. The government says it will follow the letter of the law in dealing with what it says is an illegal strike. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The railway strike seems to be heading for the long haul, as the state-run rail company KORAIL is not backing down from its decision to set up a separate rail affiliate. The labor union of the railway operator says that, unless the government responds to its demands by Tuesday, thousands of people will hold a mass nationwide protest rally on Thursday.
If there's no response to our request by the 17th, we will conduct a legitimate nationwide protest starting on the 19th.
The union is also calling the government to make sure the new affiliate is not given a license to operate a new high-speed KTX rail service. After an emergency meeting on related vice ministers Sunday, the government reiterated a stance.
This is clearly an illegal strike. The government plans to sternly deal with the strike by law.
The The strike is starting to impact other parts of the nation's rail system. Subway operations in Seoul will be cut by roughly 8% from Monday. Daily KTX services, which had been running normally last week, will be reduced by 12% starting from Tuesday. Freight trains are operating at just 30% of normal levels, and concerns are growing that supply shortages could become a reality for small and mid-sized companies in the near future. Nearly 8,000 workers are currently on strike, and despite KORAIL's threats to remove them from their positions, only 600 previously striking workers have returned to work.
Our initial plan was to increase operations with returning workers, but the return rate hasn't been as strong as we expected, and we are in need of substitutes.
Meanwhile, KORAIL registered its affiliate last week, and the new unit is expected to meet its licensing requirements over the next few days. Kim Jong-un, ARIRANG News.
Now to the tussle between the European Union and Ukraine. The EU has suspended work on a planned trade and cooperation deal with Kiev, essentially because it doesn't trust President Viktor Yanukovych to stick to his word. The EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Stefan Füle, said on Twitter that he had told Ukraine's Deputy Prime Minister, Serhiy Arbuzov, that further discussion on the trade agreement was conditional on a clear commitment by Kiev to sign it. However, Füle said that he had not heard back from the Ukraine government, and as a result, work on the agreement was on hold. Tens of thousands of people again gathered in Kiev's Independence Square on Sunday, protesting the president's last-minute refusal to sign the EU agreement, favouring stronger ties with Russia. Nelson Mandela has been buried in his hometown of Kunu, following a state funeral service at which he was praised for teaching the world the lessons of forgiveness and reconciliation. Kim Jong-ils reports.
Family, friends and world leaders bid farewell to Nelson Mandela at a state funeral Sunday in his ancestral hometown of Kunu. The service took place in a huge tent at the family compound, where Mandela's portrait looked over his coffin draped in the South African flag and surrounded by 95 candles, each representing a year of his life. Guests sang and prayed as the service began.
For Tatu Nelson Mandela, for his faithfulness to your call, his example of justice, peace and reconciliation, and his courage to endure suffering, rejection, and persecution for the sake of others.
We are deeply grateful to Madiba. We are deeply grateful that today we live in a lively democracy. We are deeply grateful that dignity has been restored to all South Africans.
During the service, a 21-gun salute was heard in the distance. Around 4,000 guests attended the ceremony, including leaders of African nations, Prince Charles, and American talk show host Oprah Winfrey. As the service came to a close, military pallbearers carried the coffin to the burial site for a private ceremony where about 450 guests paid their last tributes. Military jets and helicopters displayed South African flags as Mandela's casket was lowered into the ground. The burial concludes a 10-day period of commemorations following Mandela's death on December 5th. Mandela spent 27 years in prison, locked up for his fight for freedom against the apartheid system. Kim Jong-ils, ARIRANG News.
China's robot rover named Jade Rabbit and its lander have sent photos of the moon after safely landing on the lunar surface. 12 days after blasting off from the country's south, the robotic vehicle and its landing module touched down on the moon at just past 9 p.m. Saturday Beijing time. It marks the third unmanned rover mission to the moon since that of the US and the former Soviet Union, and the first in more than 40 years. The six-wheeled Jade Rabbit, weighing 120 kilograms, can climb slopes of up to 30 degrees and can travel 200 meters per hour. The rover's 3-month-long and the lander's year-long mission is part 2 of China's 3-step space program to eventually bring samples of the moon's soil back to Earth by 2017. Now, it's a real-life Iron Man. NASA has revealed a kind of superhero robot which could possibly go into space. Meet Valkyrie, the robot in human form with 2 legs and 2 arms, which can even walk on uneven terrain like a human. This robot was built in 9 months by a group of NASA scientists for this year's DARPA Robotics Challenge. The robot is 1.9 meters tall and weighs 125 kilograms, and NASA hopes to use the robot to explore and research Mars, as it can pick up objects and maneuver them with its hands. However, as it's powered by a battery pack, the robot's activity is currently limited to 1 hour. LED lighting may appear to be a bit on the expensive side when installed, but it can save you energy and therefore money in the long run. With another electricity shortage feared this year, local association is promoting LED lighting as the way of the future. Son Jung-in reports.
This is a parking garage of an apartment complex in Gwangju, where the LED lights automatically turn on or become brighter when a person or a car nears the area. The management of the complex says it set them back nearly $48,000 to install the lights, but it's an investment they expect to get back.
We are now saving up to 72% or almost $4,600 from the average total electricity bill of $6,300 every month.
With the effectiveness of the eco-friendly lighting coming into light, the Korea Association for Photonics Industry Development, or KORAIL, is actively pushing government agencies and the private sector to embrace the LED industry and turn Gwangju and other cities into LED cities.
For outdoor public spaces, the city of Gwangju is planning to replace more than 10% of the street lamps with LED lights within next year and continue the substitution extensively.
KORAIL, which has a goal to achieve a 60% penetration rate of LED lighting by the year 2020, is also working on helping Korea's 800 LED-related companies make inroads into other markets in Europe and Southeast Asia. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Korean researchers have been closely studying how drinking alcohol affects activity in the brain and also the consequences it may have on your mental health. A newly released study shows that even consuming alcohol in small amounts can dramatically impact how your brain controls the way you think and feel. Paulie reports.
Drinking responsibly with friends and colleagues can be an enjoyable experience. Unfortunately, having one too many drinks can lead to actions or words you may soon regret. The loss in control is already a well-known reaction anecdotally. However, scientists are still searching for the exact neurological reason as to why alcohol affects us in this way. A research team here in Korea sought to answer this question by monitoring the brain waves of 2 subject groups, those who drank orange juice and those who drank juice containing alcohol. Measurements were recorded using an electroencephalogram to analyze brain activity. A side-by-side comparison shows that those who consumed alcohol had reduced activity in their cerebral cortex, which is made up of neural tissue that connects the right and left sides of the brain. The study's lead author, Dr. Lee Jae-won from Gangnan Ulji Hospital, says that this disconnect in brain function shows a possible link to decreased rational decision-making.
If you drink alcohol, there is decreased communication between regions in the brain. I use the EEG method to determine the degree of communication between brain regions. This technology allows us to measure brain activity differently than other conventional methods.
The study was published last month in the scientific journal Alcoholism, Clinical and Experimental Research. The results show promise in establishing a new diagnostic tool in identifying various addictions and mental disorders. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off with the KLPGA. Now ready at the second event of the new season, the 2013 KLPGA China Ladies Open kicked off on Friday and ended in a dramatic fashion on Sunday. Now a close third round of the event as the 2013 KLPGA Player of the Year Chang Han-ah goes into the 18th hole with a comfortable 3-stroke lead over Kim Han-er. But in a twist of event, while Kim Jong-un finishes the hole with a par, Chang Hana barely hangs on, shooting a double bogey on the hole as she takes the title with a 3-under overall. A win is a win as Chang Hana continues her success with the new season of the KLPGA. Now, with 2014 right around the corner, there are a lot of people who want a fresh new start in life. And in the case of Park Geun-hye, a new team is just what he needs. The 28-year-old who's been rotting away on the bench during the past 3 years since signing with Arsenal of the English Premier League might be finally headed out and back to where he saw the most success. Sources say that with the January transfer window approaching, 3 League One teams are interested in signing Park. Meanwhile, Park Geun-hye has scored 25 goals in 91 matches with Monaco from 2008 to 2011. And from one Park to another, PSV's Park Ji-sung finally returned to lineup over the weekend, coming back for the first time in 78 days. Now, with Park back in the lineup, PSV was able to crush FC Utrecht 5-1 as they're now in 9th place in the league with 23 points after 17 matches so far this season. So with that, well, 2013 was certainly a bad year for baseball fans after finding out that the sport will not be included in the Olympics anymore. But turns out it might be back during the 2020 Tokyo Games. Now, Thomas Bach, the president of the IOC, stated in a press conference over the weekend that they're looking to bring back baseball into the Olympic Games once again as they prepare for the 2020 Tokyo Summer Games. While still in its beginning stages, things are looking pretty optimistic as they plan to continue the talk in February in Sochi and possibly finalize everything by December of 2014. And now moving on to some Sunday's KBL action as Anyang KGC dominates Wonju Dongbu Promi 72-57 with Ulsan Mobis Phoebus cruising past KT Sonic Boom 63-50. Meanwhile, let's take a look at Incheon Itilan Elephants take on the Goyang Orions. Of course, going into the game here, first quarter of the game, a joke of a score as Goyang manages just 3 points in the quarter as Incheon takes a 13-3 lead before going into halftime with a 26-16 lead. Now, the first half score is the lowest in KBL history as both teams try to improve their shooting in the second half. Now, Incheon holding on to a 10-point lead going into fourth quarter, but the Orions start storming back in the fourth, scoring 26 points in the quarter. And despite the late comeback here, Incheon barely hangs on and takes this game 58-56. And finally, going to Sunday's V-League action this time, Daejeon KGC beats Hunguk Insurance Life Pink Spiders 3-1, with IBK sweeping Korean Expressway 3-0 over on the women's side. Meanwhile, a close 5-set match between Hyundai Capital and LIG as Hyundai Capital sneaks in a win here 3-2. Meanwhile, let's take a look at Samsung Hwajae Blue Fangs take on the Korean Air Jumbos. Of course, going into the game here, first set, the Blue Fangs capitalize on Korean Air's mistakes here as they take the first set 25-21 before Michael Sanchez and Shin Young-soo help the Jumbos even it up in the second set 25-21. But despite Michael Sanchez putting up 29 attack points in this game, it's a one-man show from Leo Martinez, who puts up 48 points as he helps Samsung Hwajae take the next 2 sets, 25-22 and 27-25, as they take this match 3-1. And that's going to wrap it up for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day, and see you guys again for your sports needs.
And time now to check in on the weather conditions in Korea and around the world. And that's all for now. Have a fantastic rest of the day, and we do hope to see you back again for our next newscast coming up at noon Korea time.